Hey guys, I'm Titi.
And I'm Beck.
And we're what the kids call
Whateva. Fait qu'avant de commencer l'émission, je vais juste vous dire que cet épisode est sponsored par Rice Kombucha. Rice Kombucha est une marque montréalaise qui vend du kombucha, qui est basically une boisson fermentée, pétillante, basically du thé avec aussi ce qui s'appelle du scorbut, comme un mélange de microbes. Fait qu'ensemble, ça fait cette boisson qui aide avec le mental health, qui aide aussi avec la digestion, qui aide à renforcer le système immunitaire. Fait qu'on est vraiment, vraiment contente de mettre en partenariat avec Kombucha pour cet épisode. On a un live aussi où on fait un first testing. Si vous voulez, c'est encore sur notre IG. Vous pouvez voir moi et Titi avoir un first tasting de Kombucha ever. Maintenant, on a nos drinks préférés, fait qu'on peut choisir. So, c'est ça. Merci à Rice Kombucha pour la sponsorisation de cet épisode.
Yes. Okay, so we have a guest in the building. We have Dr. Lashley. Welcome. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Of course.
My name is Myrna Lashley, and I'm really, really happy to be with these wonderful young people. You should see these smiling faces in the studio. So proud of you guys. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So do you want to kind of give a little bit of background story about yourself? What do you do? What are your specialties?
I'm a psychologist. Mm-hmm. I'm in the Department of Psychiatry at McGill University. I work primarily in the area of culture. I do a lot of work with the federal departments, doing training for them in areas such as cultural competence, cultural safety, racial discrimination, la lutte, you know. Surtout aujourd'hui, nous avons des problèmes qu'il faut adresser. I work with that. I'm the one who, but right now, I'm running the task force at the Lester B. Pearson School Board. Rappelez-vous that we had a situation where two young girls created a video.
Yes.
So I'm the one that they've asked to come in, and I'm the one who's running that task force, trying to figure out how we're going to fix that mess, you know, and come up with recommendations. And I'm going to stop soon because I otherwise will take all day to tell you everything I did. But just so you know, aussi, I work with the police à chaque niveau, so le GRC, le provincial, municipal. And I was the vice chair of the, and il faut dire ça parce que j'étais la seule noire, I was the vice chair of the board of the École nationale de Québec.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so ça fait longtemps que je travaille avec.
Well, we're super excited to have you on.
And I'm super excited to be here.
Yes. Okay, so the topic of this episode is going to be corporal punishment in the Black community. So beating your children. I think it's really important to talk about that because we obviously tackle issues of the community and what makes us us and what makes us the people that we are today. And I feel like in order to understand that, we need to look at the root and inside the home and how that our home environment helps shape the people that we are today in the community, and the way that we move, and the way that we the place that we hold in society. So it's really important, and it's also a quite controversial / taboo topic in the community because it is, still practiced a lot, and it's still very much normalized across many cultures, whether it's Caribbean culture, African culture. If we're looking at like Western cultures, it's very, very practiced, and it's something that we need to deconstruct and understand where it's coming from and why do we still practice that, and what are the effects on our children growing up. So that's what we're talking about today.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Donc, j'ai posé la première question par rapport à ce qu'on appelle, en français, c'est la fessée. Battre son enfant, dans le fond. Est-ce que vous pouvez nous expliquer un peu les racines, de où ça vient? Est-ce que c'est quelque chose qui est un peu inné? Les gens le voient comme si c'est quelque chose de un peu normalisé, mais est-ce que ça a des racines précoloniales ou c'est venu après avec la colonisation? Donc c'est ça ma question. Est-ce que ça vient de ça?
This whole concept of beating had nothing to do with Africa. This was not done In general, it was not done. Because children very often were seen as though they were returning spirits. They were seen almost as gods. And the children they were kind of worshipped because children were special and they weren't beaten in this way. I'm not saying they were never disciplined. Obviously, people discipline their children. But this take off your shoe or take off your belt or quoi que ce soit and beat up your kid, no, that was not an issue. Après esclavage, well, did they ever really finish? So let's say, once they were put on that ship and put into bondage, into slavery, they were controlled, the slaves, the people who, I don't even like the word slaves, so I say enslavement, because those who were enslaved were controlled by the masters through whipping. And they also learned to whip their children to try to keep them from getting into trouble so that the masters would sell them or beat them. And so they passed on this method of control, and that's the roots of it. It did not start in Africa. C'est faux de penser que ça a commencé en Afrique parce que ce n'est pas la vérité.
Yeah. And I was reading the book. I have it right here. I'm really sorry for those that are watching the pitiful state in this book. But it's Spare the Kids, Why Whipping Children Won't Save Black America by Dr. Stacey Patton. And in the book, she talked about that as well. And there isn't any data, there isn't any historical fact proving that physically beating your children was a known form of discipline in Africa because children were very much worshipped, and in certain tribes they would even, because they believed that children were they held this, that they were reincarnations of like their ancestors that had a lot of connections to the spiritual world. So certain tribes even gave names like mom or dad or grandma or auntie to their children.
Very true.
Because they were so honored. And even to this day, my mom calls me mom and my dad calls me dad. Like that's how it is. Like it's not. And something that's really interesting that she said is, in early European times and before like the 1600s, the European they used a way of discipline that was physical with their children. They physically beat their children, and it was very harsh because they viewed children as being inherently evil. So you had to beat the evil out of them.
That's true.
So it was almost like children are the spawn of the devil. So they would beat children. It was very, very rough. There are stories of children having their tongues cut out, things like that, because children were looked at as these like creatures almost. But fast forward to colonial times, when it's time to take over and it's time to enslave the people in Africa, the same category that they used to describe children is what they used to describe Black people.
Absolutely.
When they were creating these racial categories, because race obviously was created to justify to the actions that were going to happen to justify Black people's oppression. So Black people now held the category that they once used to describe their own children.
That's true.
And then white children now became innocent and pure because white people needed to be viewed as innocent and pure.
That's
so the roles kind of reversed, and then we've kept this mentality.
That's absolutely true. I couldn't have said it better. That's exactly what happened. And the unfortunate thing is that it has continued. People internalize this way of discipline children. And one of the difficulties, of course, is that at the time of enslavement, people were thrown together into the ship. It wasn't as though they were all from the same tribe. They weren't. And so there was no one really to carry on the traditions and the teachings, and it became a matter of survival. So how do you survive? And if you equate it right now to what happens, say, in domestic abuse, I mean, because it was a form of domestic abuse in as much as the masters owned these people, they were, domesticated. Okay. So if you look at it this way, what happens in domestic abuse? Somebody's beating you, and you want them to stop, but you can't get them to stop, so you acquiesce. You just give in, right? And even now, we see that parents would tell their children, "Shh, don't speak up," or don't get him angry or don't get her angry because this will happen to you. And this is what's been passed on, this way of controlling ourselves and controlling children. So Black people learned, even after slavery, not to look white people in the eye, to look down. It was a method of acquiescing. That brutality, whether the brutality was physical or emotional, got carried on, and it was passed on to the children. When you see the white man, get off the sidewalk. Don't get in the white man's way. Say yes, sir, no, sir, look down. And so those of us in the helping professions, we've even had to learn to teach Black children and their parents to look people in the eye, to stand up for yourself, to show your own affirmation, to take your place at the table. So it's an ongoing process, but people are doing what they were taught. And beating the children is one of it. And that's got to stop because it brings about a tremendous amount of damage to kids. And it gets passed on from generation to generation. And it's one of the things that we refer to when we talk about intergenerational trauma.
Il y a une citation dans le livre Between the World and Me de Ta-Nehisi Coates.
Yeah, Ta-Nehisi Coates,
Puis il parle un peu de la relation qu'il avait avec son père, dans le sens que dans les quartiers, surtout dans les quartiers noirs, il dit « J'ai toujours connu la peur. On a peur de tout, comme on a peur d'aller en prison, on a peur de tomber dans les gangs, on a peur de se faire tirer et tout. » Puis il a dit « Et je voyais, quand mon père me battait, je voyais plus d'anxiété que de colère. » C'est l'anxiété de me perdre ou de faire en sorte que j'aille en prison ou que je perds la vie parce que chaque jour on voyait des parents qui perdaient leur enfant. Fait que je sentais plus de l'anxiété que de la colère envers moi nécessairement, mais vraiment l'anxiété que je puisse juste m'en aller. On va me battre. Il dit on va me battre parce que on va me battre parce que je suis allée dehors puis je me suis fait voler, mais aussi parce que j'ai pas répliqué, je me suis pas défendue. Il y a comme cette bataille intérieure. Fait est-ce que il y a ça un peu dans le sens que ce désir battre son enfant parce que tu veux le protéger?
Tout à fait, tout à fait. And don't forget that very often when they're beating their children, they will say, "This is hurting me more than it's hurting you." Et je pense dans un certain sens, c'est la vérité. Dans un certain sens, c'est la vérité. Children, of course, are feeling it physically. So when a parent says, well, it's hurting me more than it's hurting you, the kids are saying, what are you talking about? I mean, I'm the one who's carrying the pain. So, especially if they cut the skin, and it does happen. But je pense dans leur tête, c'est-à-dire la tête des parents, they're thinking, I don't want to do this, mais pour te protéger, faut que je le fasse. I have to beat you to make sure come to it. That you don't end up being in prison, that you don't get picked up on the street by the police, that you don't put yourself in a situation where you're going to be judged more harshly than your white friends, if you're walking down the street, parce qu'on sait des choses qui arrivent. If you're walking down the street and you get into trouble, are you going to be judged more harshly than your white friends? Disons que les deux garçons, ils volent quelque chose. How is the store owner going to say it's the black kid qui l'a volé? Or est-ce qu'ils vont dire c'est les deux garçons? And what happens very often is that they say it's the black kid. So parents think they're beating goodness into their children. But that's not how it works. Because when you're a kid, all you know is that somebody who weighs 2 or 3 times more than you do is hitting you with all their strength, and they're hurting you. And that's not the way. All that happens, people will say, oh, but he didn't do it again. And I say to them, he didn't do it so you could see him. He learned to be afraid of you. He learned to se cacher. He learned to hide.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that he changed. What you've taught him is don't do this when somebody's around to hurt me.
Yeah. Well, that's an approach that certain authors that talked about that have used as well. It's this fear of what's out there because they know it. They know it's out there, and it's kind of, let me take care of it before the white man does.
Tout à fait.
So it's preparing them for that. I wanted to ask your opinion on this because there's an author called Asada Kirkland, and she wrote a book called Beating Black Kids or Beating Black Children. I forgot which one. I read the book a couple years ago, and I went back to revisit an interview that she did. Yes, I was watching that yesterday, and one thing that she said is, yes, one of the reasons why Black parents currently beat their kids, well, a lot of them currently beat their kids, it's that fear of, what's out there and preparing them and making sure that they're okay. But there's also this level of power, because to be quite honest, as a Black person, you're not powerful in this society. You're not. And you're constantly reminded every day that you're powerless. So for certain parents, their only chance to exercise the only type of power that they have is with their children.
That's true.
And there's a chapter in her book, she talked about the remote control, and it explained in a funny way, but there's a lot of things to deconstruct with that. So the remote control, a lot of Black children have been in situations where the parent is right here, the remote is right there, and they'll tell the kids, pass me the remote. You could just lean and get it, but the kid is going to pass you the remote because you're the parent. And so the kid could be in their room playing with their games, they have to stop what they're doing to pass you their remote. And if you say no, then you'll get popped or something like that. But and then she asked the interviewer, why do we do that? And then the interviewer said, but we should. That's our child. If I want you to pass me the remote, why don't you pass me the remote? And if they say no, then I have the right to want to pop them. But it's just little things like that of us believing that because that is our child, we are supposed to have them listen to every little thing we say, as irrational as it is. And the child doesn't have the chance to ask why, because I'm your parent. And what that does is we move in society as adults, and we don't know how to be an authority. We just know how to follow authority.
Right.
That's
right.
all that we know how to do. So we can tolerate disrespect from our boss because that's my boss, because that's what my parent told me. That's my parent. That's it.
Talk back.
I don't know. I don't know why I can't say no. I'll get popped.
Sans question. Puis demander pourquoi, c'est vraiment challenge l'autorité.
Exact.
Si tu oses dire pourquoi, mais juste un pourquoi ou un quoi, même un quoi, c'est la façon dont tu parles, la façon dont tu répliques. Même moi, j'ai grandi comme ça dans la maison, fait qu'on était très...
Don't
veux pas... Don't ask, c'est parce que je suis ta mère, parce que je suis ton père, puis c'est tout. Puis c'est... ça devient plus dur après pour l'enfant de questionner l'autorité quand tu viens, même quand quelque chose arrive comme la police t'arrête, tu te dis que okay, peut-être que c'est moi, me semble que j'ai rien fait, mais t'es pas sûr et tout. Puis j'ai l'impression que on prend ça en tant que communauté, mais on n'a pas beaucoup de compassion pour nous-mêmes. On n'a vraiment, vraiment pas beaucoup de compassion pour nous-mêmes. Même quand quelque chose arrive dans la communauté, c'est comme, peut-être qu'il aurait dû faire ça. Même entre nous, on est comme, peut-être que ça, c'est arrivé, peut-être que ça, c'est arrivé, parce qu'on n'est pas habitué à questionner cette autorité.
On a peur. And your point is well taken, is that, people don't feel that they can fight back. They don't feel they can fight back authority. But that pain, that anger, that hurt builds up inside of them. So they go home, and very often it gets taken out on the children or on the family, not just the children. It can get taken out on the family. And then there's this whole thing about children should be seen and not heard. Or people will say, you think you're a man? You think you're a woman? Because that's what was said to them. Because don't forget that during the time of enslavement, people were infanticized. You couldn't be seen. Grown men were called boys.
Yeah.
Grown women were called gals.
Yeah.
You were not an adult. Because if you were an adult, how do I look at an adult? If I see that person as equal, how do I do that and treat them that way? So I have to dehumanize you. And so when people now, they're doing what they were taught. They say, do you think you're a woman talking to me like that? Well, yeah, I'm 32 years old. But in their minds, you're not a woman. But your point is that the lack of power, and that gets taken out on children, the same way it got taken out on others. I know certain members of my family, for example, when they came here, they grew up as respectable people in Barbados, having their own business, and then they came here and they were infanticized. You know, they had to put up with the horrible jokes. They had to laugh at these jokes that were not at all funny. Because they were insulting. They had to put up with being called boy or girl, and you'd find that they would laugh louder at the jokes to try to reduce the pain and the pressure, but it built up inside of them. So when they went home, you know, people got hit or people got screamed at. Children got hit. Wives, husbands got hit. I know one man who got hit in the top of his head with a frying pan. Wow. You know, the wife couldn't fight back at work. She came home, and I think he said something like, "Why are you cooking that? You know, didn't we have that 2 nights ago?" Boom.
That's interesting.
Because we forget that women can be violent also.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Est-ce que c'est quoi les conséquences à long terme ou à short terme sur les enfants qui se font battre? Parce que j'ai remarqué qu'il y a beaucoup, en grandissant, il y a beaucoup d'enfants qui disent « Je suis reconnaissant que ma mère m'ait battue, ça fait de moi la personne que je suis, ça me fait de moi une bonne personne. » Il y a quelqu'un qui a posé la question sur les médias sociaux, comment vous vous sentez par rapport à les gens qui se faisaient battre par leurs parents, comment vous vous sentez par rapport à vos parents maintenant? Il y en a beaucoup qui étaient comme « Moi, je suis reconnaissant. » que mes parents me battaient et tout, puis je pense que ça a fait de moi la personne que je suis, puis je comprends maintenant pourquoi ils l'ont fait et tout. Est-ce que vous pensez c'est vraiment un bénéfice ou c'était nécessaire ou
no.
C'est quoi?
No.
C'est quoi qu'est-ce que ça fait?
Absolutely not. And you know what? They're not wrong. They are the people they are because, in part, it's not only that. In part because of being beaten, but we are who we are. It's the history of who we are from the day of our birth jusqu'à maintenant. We have to remember that some people get beaten and make up their mind, like me, that I would never hit my child. I have never hit my child. And that's because I was beaten. It's not because you get beaten, oh, it's the greatest thing in the world. It hurts. And nobody tells you why. And not only that, the rules can change from day to day, right? And so you might get beaten today for putting this mask on the table. You thought, well, I won't put my mask on the table. But nobody tells you why. You say, don't put your mask there. Paf. So you don't put your mask there. You come in and you sit in and you don't know what to do with the mask, and you're sitting there, and somebody might hit you and say, "You're so stupid, put the mask there." But you were told not to put the mask there. So the consequences that very often children get, they're confused. They don't know what to do. As you said, they don't even know how to look somebody in the eye because they're so afraid. They're afraid to fight back if someone is treating them badly. Very often they don't know how to do that. And they pass it on. They beat their kids. And they tell themselves, it's a good thing because I was beaten. I say, did it hurt you? Well, yeah, he should hurt. Did you like it? Well, if it was such a good thing, why are you doing it now? And not only that, if it's such a good thing and it keeps people out of trouble, how come we still have people in trouble? You know, I mean, it's illogical. We end up with people who really don't know who they are, because we have to learn how to sit and talk to our kids. Children have to be able to say, explain it to me. Why not? Why can I not do that? Because you want to have an adult later who's capable of taking their place in society, and if they're going to lead people, for example, disons, they're going to be the head of a department. They have to understand that people are going to say, Monsieur, Madame Boss, why not? Why am I doing this? But if you haven't taught your children that it's okay to ask why not and to get a reasonable answer, they don't know how to do that when they become a boss. They really don't.
Yeah.
They don't know how to ask for a raise. They don't know how to explain to an employee, well, the reason I made this decision is because of A, B, C, and D. What you get back from them is parce que c'est ce que j'ai dit. You know, no one wants to hear that.
Yeah.
If you can get into a conversation with people, you can usually come to a good compromise. I did this with my daughter all the time. One of the most painful things for me is that, as I said, I don't hit my daughter. And she did something, and I said, okay, this has happened. Now, how are we going to deal with this? You know, I can't just let this go. What are we going to do? Let's talk about it. And she said, well, you know, you shouldn't let me do this. You shouldn't. She had this whole list. And it made me cry because I was never going to do that much to her. I mean, I was thinking maybe no TV for 2 days. And she had this thing up to a month and I can't do this. So then I had to renegotiate with her because I didn't want her to think that what she had to say wasn't important. So I had to renegotiate down with her. But how about if we did it for only this amount of days? How do you feel about that? And bring it back down because there was no way I was going to let her be punished for a month like she was advocating. So there are ways. Children are smart.
Yes. Yes.
J'avais cette conversation avec ma mère parce que j'ai travaillé avec des enfants beaucoup à cause de l'église. Je travaille autour d'enfants. Je suis comme, mais ils savent, ils comprennent. Comme si tu t'assois puis tu dis, mais pourquoi t'as fait ça? Puis tu laisses s'expliquer. Il va te dire c'était quoi son raisonnement parce qu'ils ont un raisonnement.
Exact.
C'est pas vrai que... Mais c'est vraiment drôle parce qu'on dit que les enfants savent ce qu'ils font seulement quand ils font quelque chose de mal. Fait que seulement quand ils font quelque chose de mal, on va être comme, tu sais qu'est-ce que tu fais, donc tu mérites. Mais quand ils essaient de s'expliquer ou c'est autre chose, c'est genre, je dois te battre pour que tu comprennes.
Yeah.
Ça fait aucun sens. Ça fait absolument
I'll
aucun
tell you a
sens.
story. I was in a store, in a shop, in a grocery with my daughter. And I'll tell you 2 quick stories. And I said to her, never leave my side. You tell this to a child, you know, you turn, the kid's gone or something like that. Fine. So I turned to get something off the shelf, and I turned back, and she wasn't there. You know, comment, j'avais peur. Huh? So I'm running around, where are you? Where? And I found her. She was just one aisle over, and I said, Renata, you know, I told you never leave my side. I said, I was so frightened. You were lost. And she looked at me and she said, but I wasn't lost. I know where I am. I mean, you know, children, they reason. Another time, we're in the same store, and she always knew, don't test me to say, I want this, I want that, because that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And so there was this other kid in the aisle, and he kept asking his mother, I want this, I want this, I want... And I watched this mother, no, you can't get it. So he threw himself on the ground, and he started kicking and crying. And Mom, she got embarrassed, and she gave it to him. So my daughter's watching this. You know, this other stuff.
Intéressant.
Yeah. What are they doing over there?
She must have been about 3. Is that how it works? So she turned to me, and she said, may I have that? I said, no, you may not. And she said, may I have that? No. May I have that? No. So down she went. I walked off and left her right there. And then I went around the corner. I could see her, but she didn't know.
Yeah.
So finally, Mommy, where are you? And there was a lady there looking at me. Said, oh, how could you leave your daughter? I said, just stay out of this.
Yeah.
You know. And so she looked up and she saw me. I said, Mommy, where did you go? I didn't know where you were. I said, well, I'm right there. I said, what did you do? And she says, well, I saw that. That's how it happens. You know, I wanted that. And I said, that's how it happens in his house. That's not how it happens in our house. And she never did it again.
Yeah.
Children are smart.
Yeah.
Children learn. Treat them with respect.
Mais j'ai vu un couple parler de la même histoire par rapport à never leave my sight.
Yeah.
Et c'est parce que c'était dans un centre commercial.
Yeah.
Il y avait trop de monde, puis il dit reste là, mais il s'en allait tout le temps. Il est parti, leur petit garçon est parti, mais eux ils le voyaient, lui il le voyait pas. Fait qu'ils ont dit laisse-le voir qu'est-ce qu'il va faire s'il nous voit pas. Il a commencé à paniquer pendant comme 1 minute parce qu'il pouvait plus voir ses parents. Il a commencé à paniquer. Ils sont allés le voir, ils ont dit tu vois qu'est-ce qui se passe, mais ils l'ont pas. No need of like physical punishment, didn't scream. C'est comme, tu vois ce qui se passe quand tu m'écoutes pas.
And that's a lesson that he will remember. Now he understands why he shouldn't leave this.
Yeah.
When you beat the kid, what have you taught them?
But it's I saw something that said, you know, we look at physical punishment as being okay only in that type of context, but not in any other type of relationship. When we're looking at work relationships, you're not going to solve an issue by beating up your coworker because that's unacceptable. You have to effectively communicate. You have to effectively communicate if you're having an issue with your friend. But the only setting that it seems to be appropriate is when we're looking at it in the house. But how are these children going to learn to effectively communicate in the future and not resort to a fist or a spank?
But that's what they do.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's exactly what they do. They learn that this is how you settle problems. You don't get your own way, you pop somebody one. You know, you hit your husband, or you hit your wife, or you hit your kids. You know, I remember being a kid, and when I was growing up, my father, he was the most loving person. I adored my dad. And he came here, and he didn't know how to deal with racism and stuff like that. So we got it. And I remember my father, when he came here, I would come in, or my father would come in, and I would sit there and shake. When I was in Barbados, my father would come in the house and be like, hey, Dad, you know, this is so cool. But got here, and he had to deal with that stuff. And as you said, he couldn't fight back at work. Had to put food on the table for it. My father would come in the house, and I would just sit there and say, did I make any mistakes today? Am I going to... And I would shake. And I said to myself, if I ever have a child, my child will never go through this.
Yeah. It's but that's one thing. It's in the book also of Spare the Children, they talked about how there's a hormone that is released through our pituitary gland called cortisol.
Cortisol,
yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, so cortisol is made to, it is released when we are going through high stress activities or fear, and it usually helps us prepare for a fight or flight response. Yeah, it's a fight or flight response. And when you're getting beaten, your body releases a lot of cortisol, and throughout time, the high levels of cortisol that is leaving your body, eventually you almost become desensitized to fear and to being put in these high level situations, because you can't really exercise your fight or flight because you can't flee.
You can't flee.
You have to stay there and take it. So eventually, and there was a study done by a doctor in Harvard Medical School, where they looked at adults like in their mid-40s that have been beaten a lot in their childhood. And some of them would say, you know, I don't even remember the first time that I was hit because of the high level of cortisol that is, they've almost become desensitized to it. They've almost become desensitized to it. And if you're living in constant fear in your house, even when you're not being beaten, your body's still releasing these...
That's right. It's still fight or flight.
Yes.
Except, as you say, you can't flee.
Yeah.
And if you flee, you're going to get beaten even more.
Yeah.
So kids just said, you know, might as well stand here and take it and get it over with. And another really despicable thing that happens is sending the child to get the weapon.
Yeah.
I call it a weapon with which you're going to harm them. It's like saying, go get a gun so I can shoot you. And we say, go pick that switch or go get that belt. I dealt with a child once when I was doing work for Battre, where the father used to keep this bit of leather, stropping leather, and he would keep it soaked in water. He would keep it so that when he hit the child, it really hurt. It really, really hurt. And, you know, and you see kids with cuts on them. And some people will say to me, yes, Myrna, it's okay to beat your kid as long as you don't cut them. I said, what you're saying to me, it's okay to beat your kid if nobody else can see the evidence. It's not okay to beat your kid. It's got to stop.
There are certain people that believe that there is a fine line between spanking and beating. Do you believe in that?
Look, again, my daughter, she's little. Never go near the stove. Never touch the stove. If you touch the stove, you might get burned. Don't touch the stove. Okay, fine. One day, she touched the stove, and it wasn't an accident. You know, she went, let me see what Mom's talking about. So, 2 fingers. And I went, don't do that. Because I know that with 2 fingers, she's not going to get hurt, but it's like a little prick. That's the only time. And why did I do that? Because that was a matter of saving her, not saving her. It was like, don't do that. I said, did that hurt you? She said, yeah. I said, that stove, it would have taken off your hand. It would have burnt you even more. That would have been, oh, okay. And off she went. But I don't believe in beating children. And as you say, it's a fine line. What do you mean by spanking? If spanking means you're going to pull off all this kid's clothes and turn them over your leg and spank them with a hairbrush because... No. I'm all for if a kid hits you in the face or something and they're very little, that's what it feels like. Not your whole hand, a finger. This is a child.
Yeah.
You know? That's what it feels like. Did you like that? No. Well, so are you going to do that again? No. If you do that again, what should we do about it? You can negotiate. You can talk to your kids.
Yeah.
That's what you need to do.
Yeah. So we hear this a lot. I love you so much. This is why I'm doing this. So how is this statement harmful, and how is it harmful if we're looking at it in the grand scheme of things in the future in future relationships, whether it's romantic or any type of relationship? What does that statement mean?
Kid equates pain with love.
Yeah,
that's what it is, or people who beat their kids and then after they go and take them in their arms and rock them and kiss them. Oh, mommy, daddy loves you so much. That it's a child. Children make associations. Children read, so they read better than people think they do. That child then associates pain with love. I had a woman in my office one day. She was complaining about her husband. She said, he never hits me or anything. I said, is this a problem? I said, well, how do I know he loves me? It's more common than you think.
I saw a video about that, but I thought she was joking. I thought she was joking when she said that.
No, this was one of my own classes. It's more common than you think.
Yeah.
Because children peer, they make associations. That's why if you do that and say, did that hurt you? Yeah. So what does that tell you? Never to do that again. Yeah. Because they peer, they make associations. So she said, how do I know he loves me? And when I worked with her, I realized that that's what used to happen to her. Her father would beat her, and then he would take her on his lap and hug her and say, Daddy loves you so much. Why do you make me hurt you like that?
Mais ça fait qu'il n'y a aucune différence entre battre son enfant puis battre son partenaire. C'est le même pattern de...
It's power.
Ouais, c'est le même pattern de non seulement le battre, mais après, donner des cadeaux, puis comme, mais je t'aime. Il y a aucunement une différence. J'ai l'impression on pense à les enfants comme cette chose m'appartient, pas comme un humain avec son propre agency, ou comme, oui, tu dois protéger ton enfant, oui, tu te dois d'élever ton enfant, mais est-ce que l'enfant t'appartient puis tu peux faire n'importe quoi avec?
And that's what happens in abusive relationships. Somebody thinks they have the right to control the other one. It's the same problématique, on dirait. I have control over you. I put a roof over your head. You don't work. I don't want you to work. I don't want you to work. I want you to wear that dress, or I want you to wear that pants. I want you to do what happened. You don't do it. Well, I control you. I own you. I own the things you're wearing. I own the food you're eating. I had this. I remember this lady who, when she went home, she had to. Her husband would come home, sit in front of the TV. she had to almost get on her hands and knees to put the food on the table. It's what he wanted. It's what she did. If not, what would happen? She'd get beaten. So again, people make arrangements to keep the pain to a minimum. Now, there's been research that's been done, and we call it learned helplessness. This is a situation where rats were put into a cage. The middle of the cage was not electrified to begin with. So the rats, you put some food down, the rats can jump from one cage to the other. They're merrily jumping back and forth. And then what happened was to electrify one part of the cage. The rat came up and touched it, electric, went back, didn't jump over. And then, you do this often enough, and the rats became so afraid that even when you opened the door, the rats would not come out. They'd learned that they were trapped, that there was nothing they could do to avoid the electrical shock. And so they just, as you said, okay. We see this in human beings too. If you feel you can't escape and you feel helpless, you've learned to be helpless.
Yeah. So for Black boys that are beaten by their mothers,
or their fathers.
Or their fathers, yes.
Or auntie or grandma or whoever.
Yeah. Can this have an effect on their relationship with Black women in the future? And in what ways?
Could have a relationship with females, whether they're black, pink, or blue, or with males. I mean, it depends upon what their sexual orientation is. If you don't know any other way to be, or if you haven't gotten therapy or any of those things where you learn how to be, how do you learn to be in a loving relationship, you do what you know. Or you make a conscious decision not to be like that. But it is not something where there is no consequences. The consequences is either that you make a decision you're not going to do that, or you get help not doing that, or you do that. Those are the options.
Right.
So yeah, everything that happened to you as a child, good, bad, or indifferent, has shaped who you are today. All of us, everybody in this room, it shaped who we are. You can't get away from that. Good, bad, or indifferent. Now, how we process it, how we interpret it, is a whole different thing. That's individual. But everything that has happened to us, and the brain is elastic, right? So the brain takes in more and more. It's not a finite amount of information that you can put into your brain. Your brain is elastic. It will go in there. And so everything, from the first thing you can remember that's happened to you all your life, is evidenced in who you are today, in how you interact with people, in how you think of yourself, how you treat yourself, how you treat others. It's all cumulative. It's all cumulative. And sometimes we sit back and we say, I can't take this anymore. You see a lot of people walking the street and they've got wonderful smiles on their faces, and they go home at night and they're crying because it takes all their energy that day to show that face, because they haven't dealt with the things that are draining them, because we've all learned to put on the face. So everything has consequences.
I think... it's ready?
Est-ce que tu avais un commentaire à ajouter?
Yeah, because the reason why I angled my question that way is because in this book there's a chapter called "You were always a Black queen, Mama. How Black boys who are whipped by their mothers grow up to mistreat other Black women." And in that chapter, there are a lot of testimonies of Black men that said, I that have deconstructed further on in their years, but early on said, because my mom would beat me and I couldn't say anything, and I had to sit there and take it, subconsciously, without realizing it, I would navigate through the world and view black women that looked like my mother with that same image.
Yeah, they're representative of their mothers.
Yes. And the same way that certain kids that grew up with a single mother would associate that with black women as well. And, we hear all the time comments that certain people make on single mothers because it's the things that you couldn't say to your mom, or the actions that you couldn't do to your mom that you're gonna do to women that look like her. So that's why I angled my question that way, because she explained how it's hard to disassociate the image that you had because you've had to internalize that pain so much. So now you've externalized it as an adult to your view on black women and your treatment of black women.
Yeah, if you're looking at it only from that perspective, that's absolutely true.
Right.
And some men make a decision, some black men make a decision never ever to date black women because they make that association. As I said to you, children make associations. And they all, they make that association of, I don't want to live that again. You talk to some, I'm not saying all black men who date women who aren't black feel this way, but some of them will tell you, no, I know what that's like. I don't want to live with it. Because they haven't done the work. They haven't done the internal work to clean up the mess that they've inherited. Because, it shouldn't make any difference what color anybody is. If you go out with somebody, you go out with somebody. Who cares? But if you are ignoring a particular set of people because of things that have happened to you, then you've got some work that needs to be done.
Yeah.
Puis si on regarde l'angle opposé, donc les petites filles noires, surtout les femmes noires sont over-sexualized beaucoup, puis ça vient de l'esclavage, ça vient beaucoup de la ségrégation, que la femme noire est juste promiscuous, qu'elle veut du sexe, qu'elle est sexuelle, puis on l'inflige aux filles noires très, 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 très jeunes. Fait que même avant que la petite fille sache c'est quoi ou comprenne c'est quoi, on va être comme, va te couvrir quand les gens arrivent. Ou comme pourquoi t'es habillée comme ça, ou comme pourquoi t'as mis ça sur ton dos, puis on va des fois arriver jusqu'à l'infligation de te blesser physiquement, donc te battre et tout. Donc, quelles conséquences ça peut avoir sur la jeune fille quand on parle de sexualité, qu'on n'en parle pas, mais on va avoir tendance à, tu mets ça, je te bats, ou tu t'habilles comme ça, je te bats, ou comme pourquoi t'as mis ça aujourd'hui et tout.
We have to do, in the black community, we have to do a better job of teaching all of our adolescents, soit des femmes, soit des filles, soit les garçons. We have to do a better job of teaching them sex ed. We're not very good at it. Ça arrive que fais pas ça. Mais le pourquoi n'est pas expliqué. And fais pas quoi. We have to understand that the body of a child, when they hit puberty, it changes. That's the nature of biology. Happens in lions, it happens in humans, it happens in felines, it happens in dogs. Ça arrive. That's how biology works. That's how physiology works. This is what's going to happen. And so the children, when adolescents hit that age, their bodies are going through changes that they don't even understand, as you said. They don't know what's happening to their bodies. They know that they have these feelings. And what does this feeling mean? And how do I work with this feeling? We have to do a better job of teaching our children. We wait, the child starts their menstrual cycle, and we say, okay, don't do this, don't dress like that. But the child doesn't understand. Why is it that yesterday I could wear these shorts? And today it's don't dress. And the other thing is, by telling that girl that, you're telling her that if she's violated, it's her fault.
Yes.
Ouais.
C'est sa faute.
Victim blaming, yeah.
Yeah, that's what you're telling them. And so I've heard people say things like, well, all these people better lock up their hens because my foul cocks are coming out, the boys, you know.
Yeah.
I've heard people say that. It's shocking to me that anyone says that. The other thing is, we have to also admit that the abuse of children happens in the black community as it does in any other community. We've got to stop pretending that child abuse only occurs in white communities. Ce n'est pas la vérité. It happens in all communities. And anybody who's looking at a child as a sexual being has problems. You should, children are not sexual beings. Children are sexual beings to other children. And that's where it should be. And we also have to admit, we have to accept that our boys and girls, or adolescent boys and girls, they hit puberty, they're going to have these sexual feelings. We should be teaching our boys about condoms. Because, whether I want it to happen or not, whether you want it to happen or not, it's going to happen. It's how we procreate. That's how the human beings procreate. It's going to happen. So we have to teach them appropriate methods. We have to teach boys about condoms. We should get our girls on the pills. We have to accept our girl children should be getting contraceptives. They should know how to put a condom on a penis. They should know how to take the pills if they're able. So not every person can take them, but they have to be taught. If you don't want to have a grandchild when your kid is 14, you should be teaching your child how to protect themselves, not to tell them sex is disgusting, because sex among people who love each other, sex with people who love each other, is a beautiful thing. And we have to tell our children, yeah, this is normal. This is normal that you have these feelings. This is what this means. Now that you have your menstrual cycle, these are the feelings you're going to have. This is what it means. It means you can become impregnated, and this is how it works. We should all have charts on our walls with the human body explaining how this thing works. And we should be talking to our boys, we should be talking to our girls, and we should be preparing them. Do you know, in Holland, they start teaching children sex ed from the time almost in kindergarten. They start talking about it then. Do you know what happened? The rate of unwanted pregnancies, teenage girls, boys, down. Down. They hardly have it anymore because they face facts. This is puberty. This is biology. This is physiology. And it has gone all the way down. Little kids in Holland can tell you how to get pregnant. They can draw the human body. They can draw the innards. They tell you how to put on a condom. They tell you what kind of condom to use. We don't even tell our kids, stay away from sheep condoms. Stay away, don't use those things. Latex. And if you're allergic to latex, let me get you to the doctor and see what kind of latex you should have. We're missing the boat here, so don't keep talking about all these girls and boys having babies if we're not doing our job. We have to do our job. We have to take the responsibility.
Puis c'est vraiment pas effectif si déjà il y a une relation de peur entre l'enfant puis le parent. Fait que quand tu as des questions, quand tu te demandes, tu as demandé à ton autre ami de 12 ans qui sait pas plus.
Qui sait rien.
Puis on figure it out, puis on va sur Google.
Exactly.
I guess.
I guess that's how it works. They don't even know how to put on a condom, You see people putting on condoms and they're pulling them all the way down. I'm thinking, oh my God.
Yeah. Or young children, what they do is that they gain most of their sexual education through pornography.
That's right.
Which is not the reality of how sex is.
No. I've told my students, do you know how many takes they had to take to get that thing to look like that? And your leg is not going to do that.
It's not.
And they don't know, so they think, well, why doesn't my man do this? Or why doesn't my woman do that? It's staged.
Yeah, it's a performance.
It's a performance.
C'est des acteurs.
Yeah.
Exactement. C'est les acteurs. And all that yelling and screaming that's going on, nobody wants to hear that. You know, that's a turn on. Who wants that?
Yeah.
But they don't know.
Yeah.
Because we're not telling them.
Mais même je trouve que même avec ce qui vient avec le sex ed, tout ce qui est consentement, puis on parle toujours de, tu sais, les enfants, parce qu'on a le droit sur, on va les battre, ou tu vas dire, go kiss your auntie, même s'il veut pas, puis le faire. On n'a vraiment aucun concept du consentement.
And
Puis quand il y a
boundaries.
des vagues de dénonciation, personne comprend, mais en tant que société, il y a aucun concept. On en
That's
apprend.
right.
À 5-4 ans, tu peux expliquer à un enfant, ça, c'est ton corps. Si tu veux pas qu'on touche,
Don't
tu
do
dis,
it. Don't let it. Exactly. Exactly. You know, when my daughter was little, she and her dad had this ritual. I mean, from the time she was a baby. He'd get up in the morning, he'd get in the bathtub, and he'd take her in the bathtub, and he'd wash her, and he'd call me, and this went on. You know, nothing happened. There was never any issue of that. I mean, you try to do that today, and everybody's got all kinds of things, but this was part of their own bonding. But when she got old enough that, you know, they weren't doing that anymore, she maybe 1 or 2, 2 years old or something, she went, no, we're not going to do that anymore. We said to her, now listen, and we told her independently, we deliberately told her independently, if anybody touches you, I don't care who it is, and I know she was very close to her dad, and I said, if your dad touches you, I knew that wasn't going to happen, but I wanted her to understand, if your dad touches you, you come and tell me. Et son père dit, nobody is to touch you. Si ta mère te touche, faut que tu me dises. So she needed to know that even these two people who loved her so much and would never harm her and that it was to get across to her that in this conversation, nobody's off bounds. Anybody. So, go and sit on that uncle's lap. Say, what?
Right? Right?
Or go and kiss that auntie. You don't know what Uncle Nasty has done. And anyway, if the child doesn't want to, that should be all there is to it. Do you want to go and kiss Auntie Flo? No, I don't want to. Okay, you don't have to.
But it's a hard thing to communicate when we're trying to teach consent and boundaries to our children when we're not respecting their boundaries when we're hitting them, because
That's
obviously
right.
they're not consenting of that. They just are in a position of there's a power dynamic and they
That's
just have
right.
to say yes. So
That's right.
they just sit there and take it. But that is not that relationship is not, you're not being consentful right now. You're not you're not respecting the child's boundaries. So it's hard to teach something that you're not practicing yourself.
But people who beat up their children, they're not having this conversation.
Right.
Because it's all the power that carries through. They're not having this conversation about, do you want to kiss Auntie Flo, or do you want to go and sit on Uncle Tom's lap?
Yeah.
They're not having that conversation because the power continues. Go and do that. I remember this story with my mom. And my mom just cried so much. I hate pilchards, and I get sick on them. And I had been at my grandmother. I came home, and my mom was cooking pilchards. And I said, Mommy, that's going to make me, I can't eat that. And she says, oh, you're going to be fine. It's not true. You're going to be fine. I'm thinking, Mommy, I can't eat it. My grandmother knew, and she never. But my mom, she said, the kids. So I said, if it's salmon, I'll eat it. But if it's pilchards, I'm not eating it. She said, it's salmon. So I ate it, and I kept smelling. I said, Mom, are you sure? Check the tin. I must have been about 8. I said, check it, Mommy. It smells like pilchards. And she says, no. Would I lie to you? I'm your mom. It's salmon. Well, I ate this thing. I got so sick. I vomited. And she looked at me. She says, oh, my God, you really are allergic. And she cried. She just cried. She says, I thought you were just kidding. I'm so sorry. You got to listen to your kids.
Yeah.
My kid hates peas, and she hates cooked carrots. so we don't have them.
Yeah.
You know, I eat peas. She doesn't. But why is it that we can't allow children to say, I don't like peas?
Yeah.
Doesn't mean I have to go and cook another meal. Okay, on your plate, there'll be no peas. You like broccoli? Here's some broccoli. You know, I don't have to go and cook. People think that if a child says, I don't like something, it means they have to go and cook 10 meals because the child is spoiled. If you don't like something as an adult, you don't eat it.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
You know, why does this child have to eat this? Unless the child is obviously playing with you and saying, oh, cook this, cook that. And you don't want to cook 10 meals. You say, well, you eat what I cook. But for this one item on your plate, you don't like peas? How about some corn? Or how about some broccoli?
But it's coming from not communicating with your children like they're actually people and asking them why. We can go a long way from just asking why. And that's what the author Asada Franklin was saying. It's a lot of the reasons why we beat our children, it's not knowing why. Why are you behaving this way? Why are you doing this? Why are you acting by going and digging as to why, then you can attack the why with different solutions. Like my brother, for example, because my mom never hit my brother and I. So my brother, when he was very, very well behaved growing up, very well behaved. And in third grade, he's extremely well behaved as well, but he started to act a little differently before going to school in the morning. He'd hide his book bags and his clothes and pretend like he'd fake being sick. Like he never wanted to go. Something was happening. And, you know, obviously my mom had things to do. She had to get ready for work. It was a lot to have to, okay, like get your things ready. But she eventually understood, like, no, like there's clearly something bothering you. So she had to have a meeting with the principal and like speak with and have my brother there. And at 8 years old, like he explained that his teacher was really mean to him. Like she was really, really mean to him and for no reason. So my mom already knew that she was going to pull him out of that class and give him a different teacher. But before that, since she saw how her child was so distraught, you know, she took him out of school for a month. Like she took, because he was not okay. Like he was not okay.
He's not okay.
He wasn't okay. And she could have, you know, went the route of, you know, get your ass in that bus.
Beating okay into him.
Right. Like you're gonna get your ass in that bus and you're gonna go to school and I'll beat you to the bus. Like, but you know, she took him out of school for a whole month, and every day she'd leave work early. She'd take him to all of these coffee shops. Like they'd talk. And once she made sure he was okay,
that's what you got to do.
He came back to school and got a different teacher.
That's what you have to do.
Ma petite sœur, ça arrivait exactement la même chose, mais à la garderie. Il y avait une petite fille qui la frappait. Puis ma petite sœur est vraiment grande. On est toutes grandes dans notre famille. Tous les enfants sont grands. Puis ma mère était comme, mais tu te défends pas. Puis elle est comme, mais ils sont toutes petits, je vais pas frapper. C'est vraiment une enfant 12. Puis c'était vraiment dur de l'emmener à la garderie tous les matins. Elle pleurait, puis elle voulait pas y aller. Puis une fois, ma mère est allée la chercher, puis elle a vu ma sœur jouer. Puis elle a vu l'enfant qu'elle parlait lui frapper un gros coup dans le dos. Elle a vraiment frappé fort, comme un gros coup dans le dos. Mais c'est une enfant qui frappe, mais qui est très silencieuse. Fait qu'elle va te frapper. Puis elle va être très calme après. Elle va te frapper. Mais le fait que ma mère l'a vue, ma mère elle a vraiment pété un plomb. Là. Elle allait parler à la direction. Elle est comme, elle frappe mon enfant. Elle frappe mon enfant. Puis si vous faites pas quelque chose, puis mais c'est vraiment pour montrer que les enfants savent qu'est-ce qui... ils savent vraiment qu'est-ce qui se passe, comme qu'est-ce qui va pas dans leur corps. Même moi, quand j'avais 6 mois, ma mère me donnait des œufs puis je les crachais tout le temps. Mais j'ai 6 mois. Ma mère me donne des œufs, je les crache. Elle
you
comme,
still hate eggs.
Ouais, j'aime pas ça. Puis elle est allée chez le docteur, puis le docteur a dit, elle a déjà la vitamine. C'est pour ça qu'elle en a pas de besoin. Genre, si tu continues à lui donner, elle va avoir des réactions. Comme c'est pour ça qu'elle les enfants savent, ils savent vraiment qu'est-ce qui se passe. Ouais.
No. You know, the same thing happened with my daughter. Smart kid. My daughter, not because she's my daughter, she's bloody brilliant. You know, she's amazingly bright. And she started not wanting to go to school again in kindergarten. You know, this was a kid who would get up, gotta go to school. And first day she said, I have a bad headache. okay. If you had a headache, I'm not sending you to school. Go back to bed, we'll see. Le lendemain, la même chose. Je dis, mais qu'est-ce qui se passe peut-être, faut que j'aille au docteur avec elle pour voir qu'est-ce qui se passe. And she says, I think I'm going to be all right, mommy. I don't think I have to go to the doctor. I just need to lie down. Bon, OK. Le troisième jour, elle était bien, elle se levait, joyeuse, mais time to go to school, oh, je feel pas. Je dis, Je dis, OK. So, je dis, je vais avec toi à l'autobus, je vais parler avec madame la chauffeuse pour voir qu'est-ce qui se passe. Et quand je suis arrivé là-bas, I said, brought my daughter, she said, la madame a dit, as-tu reçu mes messages? Je dis, mais quel message? Je dis, mais je t'ai envoyé des messages, j'ai donné le papier à ta fille, elle n'a pas donné. Je dis, non. Tu sais, quand même, je dis, mais qu'est-ce qu'elle a fait? Tu sais, you always say, what's my daughter done? And she said, what's the problem? What did she do? She said, your daughter is being beaten every day. Je dis, quoi donc? But à ce moment-là, I got very black.
Yeah. Yeah.
I went seriously black. Forget all these degrees. Let's get down to earth.
Yeah.
I said, what now? And she said, your daughter's being beaten every day. And I said, par qui? C'est deux enfants en arrière. Two little white kids. And I say white, and you'll understand why I say white. I say, but why? She said, I don't want to say the word. I said, dis-le. And she said, well, she's being called the N-word chaque matin, and they're beating her.
Wow.
I said, okay. I said, Renata, get off the bus.
Yeah.
Get in the car. We're going to school.
Yeah.
Sleeves are out.
Yeah.
Mommy's going to school. And so I went to school, and I said to the headmaster, I said, talk to the bus driver. She told me blah, 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 blah. Calling the bus driver. La madame a dit, oui, c'est ça. I said to my daughter, why didn't you give me no? And this is what happens with racism, is that we get embarrassed. We, the victims, become embarrassed, And we learned this from the time we're kids. And so called in the parents, des deux enfants. One parent, she was so embarrassed. She says, mais je sais pas où il a appris ça. That's disgusting, madame. Je suis désolée, I'm going to deal with my kid with this. C'est pas acceptable. She was, vraiment, elle a parti de pleurer. She was really... La deuxième, the friend of the other kid, la madame est arrivée. Elle dit, mais what's the problem? Elle est un nigger.
Oh.
Wow.
Wow. To your face.
Very, and to the headmaster.
Wow.
So the headmaster said,
wow.
The headmaster said, your child's expelled. Dès que maintenant. I said, "Bae." He said, no, there's no bae. There's no bae. And he looked at her, and I think, if I recall, he asked her if she liked Jews, and she says, non plus. And he said, I'm Jewish. But he said, your kid's expelled, get out.
Damn.
That's crazy.
That's really so children know.
Yeah.
You got to trust them.
Yeah. There's always a reason.
Yeah, and here's a child talking about beating. She didn't want to be beaten. But she also was starting to learn how to cower, how to say, as you said, cortisol, fight or flight.
Yeah.
She flew.
Wow. That's
Je suis vraiment saisie.
I saw one thing that said and when you're beating your children, it's who is benefiting from it? Is it the punisher or the punishee?
It's the punisher.
Yeah, because let's say your child is running around the house and you tell them, stop it, they don't stop. You beat them. At the end of the day, you're now, the house is now silent. You get what you want. But
à quel prix?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
Ouais.
Yeah. It's a short-term solution.
And it's not even a solution.
Yeah.
Children, the other thing is we say, stop running around the house. What do children do? Children discover their world.
Yeah.
That's what they do, especially the little ones. Everything, c'est une nouveauté pour eux. I'd be out. Why are you taking your kid walking if you've only got 10 minutes? Put the kid in a pusher or what have you. Because I remember being in London with my daughter, crossing Trafalgar Square. And I've got her by the hand, and she saw something fly across, and good thing I'm holding her because she's turning around and she wants to go and follow this thing that she saw. We'd be out walking and she'd see a butterfly, and she'd just drop down by the side of the road and say, flutter by. and kids discover their world. Mm-hmm. And if you got a child at home, don't expect that child to sit quietly for hours. It's not going to happen. That's not what children do. And yet we tell them they need to exercise. We tell them, we talk about their energy, but we don't encourage them with the energy. Find something for them to do. Children are going to run around. You have to make deals with them. How about you don't run for 30 minutes and we do this thing? Or you can even say, Mommy or Daddy has a headache right now. Kids love looking after their parents. You say, I have a headache. I don't feel well. Oh, I'm sorry. So how about we make a deal and you read for 30 minutes. I'm going to lie down for 30 minutes, so you could even come and lie down with me and read to me or something like that. You compromise. That's what you got to do.
Mais ça m'amène un peu à la prochaine question. Si on a confirmé que battre son enfant, c'était aucunement une solution, mais ce serait quoi les alternatives? Puis je pense qu'on en a parlé un peu tout le long. Parler.
Talk with your children. Help them to work out the solutions. Kids will help you work out the solutions. Kids will say, don't make me eat peas for a month. Yeah. But kids will work out a solution with you. And very often what they come up with is harsher than anything you would have come up with. Kids know. So, little Robert, what do you think we should do? How should we solve this? And very often, if you're beating your kids, look at the way they play with their dolls and teddy bears and what have you. You might sit there, you hear the kid whacking the inanimate, whacking the doll or whacking the teddy bear. They're learning what you teach them. And you might think it's cute and say, it's not cute. It shouldn't hurt to be a child. Yeah. And what children are doing is learning who they are. They're learning to explore their world. I'm not saying you don't discipline children. Children need rules. They need to know.
Un encadrement.
Yeah, and they need to know how to navigate in the world. They need to know what's dangerous and what's not dangerous. But children navigate. Children need to learn. That's what they do. It's part of their developmental task. Who am I? Where am I? What does that mean? And they're going to ask questions. Children will ask you why. They'll never shut up asking you why. Why? So why is it that it's okay when you're out in the park with them and they say why and you answer, but when you say don't do that and they say explain, because all why means is explain it to me. Don't ask me questions. Got to fly in here. Don't ask me questions. I mean, they're asking the same question. They want an explanation.
Yeah. But why do you believe that? Because even the younger generation now, there are a lot of people that still say, people that are like my age, or they would say, yeah, but, I understand, but I'm still going to beat my children. Why do you feel like it's still a notion that we decide to practice and continue holding on for future generations?
They're doing what they know.
Yeah.
They're doing what they know. They believe the myth that beating their children is going to make them good. What children learn is not to do it in front of you. Mm-hmm. And we've got a lot of kids who got beaten who are out there doing a lot of bad things because that's all they know. Mm-hmm. And again, it comes back with the power. You've got a lot of young people who've got babies, boys and girls, who've got babies. They don't know how to look after the kids. They might not even have the money. They might not even have a job. But they've got this responsibility. Well, who pays the price for that? It's usually these children. Mm-hmm. You've got a lot of abandoned babies. We've got, I remember this young man coming into my office, and he was 17 years old. He already had a kid that he wasn't supporting. Mm. And he had 2 women dropping babies for him that month. Mm. So at the end of that month, he was going to be a father 3 times, not able to support them. So, qu'est-ce qu'il m'a dit? At least my Johnson's working. I said, well, what now? Il était fier. Mm. My Johnson's working. But you got 3 children out there.
Yeah. Mm.
With a mother who can't support them, and a father who can't support them. And what happens? It's the grandmothers and the grandparents that this goes back to. Mm-hmm. I said, my mayor's going to help me, But it's your responsibility.
Yeah. And there's this, it's also, I feel maybe it's the reason why we continue the cycle is because in the Black community, we have this idea of respecting our elders, and there's this idea of loyalty to our parents and our parents' beliefs and the way that we've been raised. So you hear a lot of people say, they'll give you a view like I'm, let's say, homophobic. No, that's just the way I was raised. That's just the way I was raised. We have this sense of loyalty to the ways that our parents have taught us, and we adopt that as growing up as well.
Mais je pense que en tant qu'être humain, tu as besoin de repères.
Yeah.
Fait qu'il y a des affaires que tu comprends même pas, mais ma mère le faisait, mon père le faisait. Fait qu'on hold on to that. Mais je pense qu'il faut qu'on comprenne que ça se brise des traditions puis ça se crée.
Yeah.
C'est un constant mouvement. T'es pas obligé parce que ma mère, parce que mon... Tu peux vraiment te créer une nouvelle tradition puis c'est ça qu'on fait maintenant dans mon maison.
Why do we send our children to school? It's so they can learn things.
Yeah.
And they can learn new things. And, I remember... My mom, when I go to school, my mom would come, when I come home, my mom would say, teach me what you learned today. Tell me what you learned today. And I would tell her, and they told me this, and I learned this, and I learned that. And sometimes my mom was very religious, and sometimes she'd say, I don't believe in that. She says, but you're a new generation, sweetheart. Mm-hmm. She said, you're a new generation, and I believe what I know that you're not going to agree with me on this. And my mom would always say, and that's why I send you to school. And I tell you a story about my mother. You're talking about homophobia. My mother was homophobic. But here's an interesting thing. My mom, and she would always talk about the Bible. She was very religious, homophobic. So there was a young man who lived in our village. And for people say, oh, he found out he was gay. I said, no, he's known, he not something that he found on the street here, And anyway, but he contracted AIDS. Mm. And they were all up in arms, touch him. My mom was also a nurse, And my mom would say, oh, for God's sake. But here's the thing. I went to Barbados, and my mom she had this set of dishes. I said, Mommy, why do we have this other set of dishes? And she says, these are X's dishes. I'm not going to mention his name. She said, these were X's dishes. And I said, what are they doing here? And she says, well, I cook, and I take him food in his own dishes. And she would wash his clothes. She would go get his clothes and put them in the washing machine. She won't put them in with hers. She'd wash them separately. But in all fairness to my mom, at the beginning, people didn't really know how things were contracted. But I was very proud of my mother because this was a great step for this very religious woman to say, he's an être humain. Come on, and I'm going to cook for him. I'm going to take him his food Even if I'm putting it on a different plate, I'm going to bring his clothes. I'm going to wash them in my washing machine, even if she's not washing them with hers. But I thought that was an amazing step for her. And she was telling me how so many people in the neighborhood treated them so badly. And my mom's attitude was, she always said to me, you live and you learn. And then she said, I know, she says, I hear you in my ear all the time. She says, and I know that if I had behaved as other people, she said, you would never shut up. She said, you'd be calling me every day. She said, you'd be at me. She said, frankly, Myrna, I don't want to hear your mouth on this. So she says, just do it. Mm-hmm. So we send our children to school. We want them to learn. But then when they learn things that don't agree with the way we've always done things, we say, you don't know what you're talking about. Why do we send them to school to learn and then negate what they've learned?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know? Yeah. And so we have a job teaching our parents also.
Yeah.
And my mom's right. I would have been calling her every day.
Yeah.
Mais c'est quand même elle a appris de vous. Comme il y a quand même eu un échange de...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'd cook something and she said, that's not the way you cook it. Yeah, no. Let me cook that for you. Say, Mommy, yeah, go sit down. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, let me teach you something. And, yeah, you know.
Mm-hmm. You brought up the point of the 17-year-old with 3 kids on the way.
One.
Oh, one.
One ready.
And then two on the way. Okay, two baking. Okay. So, do you feel like in proper sexual education and also many people in the Black community's views on abortion and things like that, do you feel like that plays into people having children when they're not? They don't have the skills to.
They're not ready.
They don't have the skills to effectively raise a child. It has?
Well, I think part some of it might be that, but it's also this belief that even if I get pregnant, mommy will look after it. You know, and the grandparents will often, don't kill my child. But I understand. But you know what? If we gave them good sex education, a lot of it wouldn't happen anyway. Doesn't mean that they're not going to have sex. That means that they're going to have safe sex. We've got to accept that our children are sexual beings. And you hear people say, oh, she's 25 and I had a grandchildren. Well, how are you going to have grandchildren if you don't have sex?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So if they're going to have sex, and they are, we've got to stop this delusion.
Yeah.
That our children it's like children thinking that their parents didn't have sex for them to be here. Children don't like to think that their parents have sex. But they do. They do. And so we've got to understand that our children are sexual beings. They're human beings. And we've got to teach them the skills that are necessary when it comes to sexuality. We've got to be open. We've got to talk to them. We've got to tell them about their body. I don't know how many people aren't teaching their children about HPV. Those kids should be or children, as any other child, should be getting that vaccine when they're at 12 years old. They should be getting that vaccine. We're not teaching them how to examine their breast. Mm-hmm. You know, teach your child teach her how to examine her breast. And you know what? She's a younger version of you. You've got breasts too. You probably fed her out of them. So teach her. Show her how to do the examination. Don't be afraid. And if you don't want her to see your body, well then get a doll or something. You know, and show your child how to examine her breast. This is a life or death issue. Men, go and get your prostate exam. We've got to talk to our boys about this. Prostate cancer is killing so many Black men. It's one of the highest rates of death among Black men is prostate cancer. But we're not teaching them. We're not talking to our sons about it. And it's not good enough to say, well, when they get 50, they'll figure it out. No, they should know from now that you start preparing for that. We've got to talk to them about colonoscopies, boys and girls. Yes, you don't start your colonoscopy when you're 20, but know that this is coming. Learn how to protect yourself. We've got to move into the area of protection in so many areas.
Yeah.
Sex is an important one of them. Children, adolescents, as soon as puberty, as I said, kids don't know what's happening to their bodies. They just know they've got these feelings. And so we've got to acknowledge that. We went through it. You know, we seem to forget that we were once young people. And we've got to talk to them. We've got to buy a bloody box of condoms and take your kid to the drugstore with you and let them see that there's nothing embarrassing about asking for that box.
Yeah.
Would you rather have them have a box of condoms or have them with a big belly that with nobody to support that kid that you've got to take on? Take them to the drugstore, buy the condoms in front of them, show them there's nothing to be embarrassed about. Teach them which ones to get. If you can't do it, ask the pharmacist to do it. The pharmacist will do it for you. They will help you teach your children. Do the right thing. Protect your children. Love your children enough to teach them how to protect themselves.
Yeah. That's interesting. That was...
Merci beaucoup.
That
On a fait le tour.
was a great discussion.
Ouais.
So, just to close off, I know that this is a touchy topic because to talk about issues of the community is to show that there are issues in the community.
We're
and there
just like any other community.
Exactly.
We're no different, no better, no worse.
Exactly. And in order for us to advance, we do need to fix a lot of the cracks that are there. And unfortunately, many of the cracks are due to colonization and white supremacy and things that we've been taught to adopt. And we have to work towards deconstructing that.
Absolutely.
And because we've internalized so much, we don't even realize it. It's intergenerational at this point. We don't even realize how much we've internalized and how much does not come from us. If we go back to what we said in the beginning, pre-colonial times, there were no signs of physical punishment. You know, in a lot of West African cultures, their stories were information was taught through tales and stories and songs. And one of the forms of discipline would be, you know, to tell your children, if you do this, you'll have hair that grows the back of your neck. These were like the kinds of forms of discipline that were there before. So we are essentially treating our children the way that white supremacists treat us.
Like chattel.
So it's important to talk about that because in this process of deconstructing, we have to let go of certain beliefs that we've held on for so long that we don't even realize are so harmful.
Well, what you're doing is an act of love.
Right.
Whether it's understood or not on the surface, it's an act of love. It's saying, we care so much about our community. We care so much about these little boys and girls that we're going to open this up. We're going to pop open the box. We're going to open up the secrets and say, how do we fix this? So it's an act of love. And we have got to stop thinking that our community is any different from any other community. We've got the same joys, the same woes, the same issues. But on top of that is race. But other than that, we hate, we love, we do good things, we do. But I want us to reach the day. I want us to reach the day where we're not special.
Yeah.
I want us to reach the day where we don't need people to protect us. Where every time we turn on the TV, it's not a black doctor or a black lawyer because you can't have a black crook. You know, I want us to have black crooks, black good people, black bad people. I just want us to be people.
Yes.
So what you're doing, my friends, is an act of love, and you should be congratulated for it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lashley. We really appreciate you coming. This was an amazing discussion. Thank you for taking the time to be here.
Thank you for having me.
You brought so much to the discussion.
Nos meilleurs épisodes, c'est quand nous, on apprend.
Yeah.
Vraiment. C'est pour ça qu'on on amène des invités parce qu'il y a there's just so much that we know personally. Fait que vraiment, c'est un honneur de vous avoir sur cet épisode.
Yeah.
Surtout, c'est notre premier épisode où c'est vraiment intergénérationnel. D'habitude, dans les gens de notre âge. Fait qu'on a tellement appris.
Yes.
Thank you so much
Thank you
for
for sharing
having
your
me.
anecdotes and your stories as well.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you.
Merci.
So on that note, I'm Titi.
And I'm Beck.
And we're what the kids call
Woke or Whatever.